So yes, you are joining the webinar around reuse and refill, specifically looking at the work that we've done with our partners, looking at behaviour change interventions to increase citizen participation in reuse and refill. And you may recognise the refill zone picture, which is from Asda, and we worked in partnership with Unilever as well. We were funded by UKRI, Innovate UK, to deliver this project. My name is Rachel Gray, and I'm the interim head of citizen behaviour change, and I'll be running the webinar today with lots of help from colleagues and Asda and Unilever. So in case you don't know who we are, as WRAP, we are a climate NGO working to tackle the causes of climate crisis. And our vision is a thriving world in which climate change is no longer a problem. We have a vision, mission and purpose all around making a thriving world in which climate change is no longer a problem. And obviously this particular webinar feeds into all of that. So today on the session, I'd ask the others to, if you can take your cameras so we can see your faces. So it's myself, Rachel Gray. Also, we have Leah, who's a special advisor here at WRAP, who will introduce herself a bit more when she does her section. We also have Polly from WRAP, who is our research analyst, and our two partners from Unilever and Asda. So I'll quickly hand over to Katie to introduce herself.
Thank you, Rachel. Good morning, everyone. So my name is Katie Scott. I am the Home Care and Sustainability Insight Lead for Unilever in the UK and Ireland. I've been at Unilever for about 8.5 years, and about 5 to 6 of those have been picking up sustainability-led projects, either globally or locally, and I've been working on the refill project for about 3 years now. So I'll hand over to Susie.
Thanks, Katie. Yes, good morning, everybody. I'm Susie. I've worked at Asda for about 14 years now. Most of my time there has been around being a packaging development manager, but more recently my attention has turned to no packaging, which is why I lead the work that we're doing on refill and reuse, which is why I'm here today. So nice to see you all today. Thank you.
Thank you to you both. So what are we going to cover today? Obviously, I'm doing the welcome. I'm going to give a little bit of introduction and context. Polly will run through both phase 1 and phase 2, the research findings, and Leah will cover the development and implementation of the behaviour change interventions, or BCIs as we call them. I'll bring it all together from that presentation session, which will last around 50 minutes. And then we'll be having a discussion with Katie and Susie about their findings and their thoughts on the projects. And then I'll bring it to a close in around an hour and a half's time. So let's get started. So introduction. Why did we do this project? We all got together because we felt this project was really important, because we all believe that reuse and refill systems are important. And this project was delivered to understand how these systems can be part of mainstream shopping. WRAP's work with the UK Plastics Pact has shown us that from lots of feedback across members that the citizen engagement part of it is really challenging. Obviously, the operational part is challenging too, but that this citizen engagement was really challenging, and we needed to better understand how systems could be taken up and adopted by shoppers. So why do we think this is important? Well, of course, I'm sure you're all on the call today looking at the reduction in plastic pollution, also reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, both of which refill and reuse can contribute to. If you're a member of the UK Plastics Pact, there are some core targets, 2 targets around delivering reuse and refill. And we also know that citizens' willingness to give it a try, and we needed to try and harness that. You know, we have our own research that show there's a good proportion of people that are prepared to try this, so let's find a way to help them do that. To do that, we need to understand the shopper journey. And as you'll see, well, by the shopper journey, we mean right from being at home planning the system to going to store to going back home again. So it's that whole journey we were looking at. But we knew that to get reuse and refill out there and being part of normal shopping, we need reach and scale, and we need to better understand how to do that. So this is why we did the project. And like I said, we did this together, and we did this with funding from UKRI and Innovate UK. So let's just give a bit of context if you don't know. Asda launched their flagship sustainability store in Middleton in Leeds in October 2020. This consisted of a refill zone. And in 2021, new lines and brands were added. Included in that is our other partner, Unilever, and their products, which include Persor, Radox, Simple, and Alberto Balsam, along with lots of other goods like cereals, rice, pasta, tea, and coffee, as you can see. The refill zones are now in stores in Glasgow, York, and Milton Keynes. This project specifically focused on 2 of those stores, Leeds and York. So as I said before, the main project objective was to understand the barriers and enablers, what citizens face when actually using in-store refill. It was to then look at those barriers and develop interventions that could build on those barriers and overcome them, and understand whether the interventions were successful or not. I think one thing to bear in mind is this was a qualitative study to work out what people think and feel. This isn't necessarily, looking at the quantitative side of things, although in the main report, there is some information about this. This was really understand how people feel about this, their emotions and their barriers to taking part. This is the timeline. So we started back in the summer with an evidence review, looking at all sorts of sources from our own to member feedback to academic sources. We then did phase 1 of the ethnographic research to really understand those barriers of shopping in particularly in Leeds. We took all of that information in November and March to develop a series of interventions to try and overcome those barriers. We deployed those interventions, and then in phase 2 looked at how we could actually measure what was happening. We are now pulling it all together and disseminating the findings today, and you are the first people to see those findings on screen and in a webinar. So I'd like to hand over to Polly now, who will take you through the first stage of research, looking at those barriers to shopping, reuse and refill. Over to you, Polly.
Thank you, Rachel. Hello, everyone. My name is Polly. I'm a research analyst here at WRAP. So I was involved in the sort of primary research side of this pilot. So the 2 in-store research phases, with many thanks to our contractors, DJS, for carrying out that field work. I will now talk you through the first phase of the field-based research that went ahead for this pilot. So our interventions with phase 1 were to build an understanding and get some insights into how citizens view and interact with reuse and refill systems. We didn't have a good understanding of the barriers to participation in refill, hence the need for the research. So phase 1 provided us with a really rich qualitative insight into the motivations and barriers for using Asda's refill zone. And we looked at 3 groups of participants. So we had current users who were using the refill zone prior to the pilot, lapsed users who had used it previously to the pilot but since stopped for whatever reason, and potential users who had never used the refill zone before. So as Rachel mentioned, we took a look at the entirety of the shopping journey, seeking to better understand how our participants had to plan and prep their shop at home, through to how they found using the refill zone, both practically and emotionally, any sort of issues that cropped up during their shop or when checking out, and finally the process of taking their shopping home and putting it away. So we were particularly trying to pick out any barriers that presented themselves, which made any part of this process more difficult. So how did we achieve this? The methodology for phase 1 fell into 3 main steps. First of all, a pre-shop Zoom interview with participants to understand current shopping behaviour, any pre-existing awareness or impressions of using the refill zone, and what preparation would be required for a refill visit. Secondly, researchers accompanied the participants on a shopping trip and observed as they bought 3 items from the refill zone. We sought to understand the attitudes towards refill and reuse as a concept, how the trip was experienced and how they found checking out, and then any sort of emotions that cropped up post-shop. And then finally, we did another Zoom interview following their sort of shopping experience. And the researchers talked through these unpacking videos that they had submitted, that the participants had submitted, and talked through with the researchers any challenges that they had faced, how they stored their refill products at home, and the likelihood of them returning to the refill zone. So in terms of motivations, our research participants could see an array of benefits to using the refill zone, which influenced their decision to try it out. So our participants said that they appreciated being able to only buy what they need, therefore saving money. Another benefit is being able to test out different food, brands, or formats of a product before committing to a big purchase. One participant actually even noted how beneficial this would be with trying out different pet foods, for example. So not only did they recognise the benefits of refill and reuse for the planet, but they also recognised the personal benefit of this by having just less waste, less rubbish to deal with at home. And finally, our participants noted that they were just excited to try something new. As refill and reuse remains still quite an uncommon method of shopping, our participants reported, quite a lot of motivation to use it based purely on its novelty factor. However, some of these motivations are challenged by the barriers that cropped up. So we found that firstly, participants were unsure where to start. They stated that they got a little overwhelmed when they entered the refill zone for the first time, sort of unsure of how to use the dispensing machines and just the new technology. Next, once they had sort of got their head around that, they needed to actually decide what they were going to purchase. But participants, they were concerned as to whether the sort of specific brands or products they liked were available and on offer. Once they had identified a product to purchase, participants then assessed the expected cost, as well as container requirements. Most assume that the refill zone will be cheaper due to a lack of packaging, but many actually found it difficult to compare price per gram or kilogram, as well as what quantity they required. So this is where feelings of confusion and worry sort of tended to crop up or even reappear for some. However, sort of once participants got to the checkout, they found that this was largely the same process as with a kind of typical package shop, and it was easier than they had potentially expected. In terms of the barriers that we encountered when participants were having to transport their shopping home, we found that if they were travelling by car, this was usually a smooth and easy process, sort of typical to a normal shopping trip. But potential barriers did emerge for those who travelled home by public transport or walked, as the containers used for purchasing products are potentially bigger and heavier than packaged items, and therefore can be difficult to carry home or handle on public transport. That being said, those participants that were more established current users had developed strategies to improve both ease and convenience in this regard, such as a lighter container for on the go, which they refill and store, and decant into larger, heavier containers at home. However, for newer users, this barrier can hinder the motivation to expand the range of products they purchase, as multiple containers are difficult to carry. Once at home, unpacking the shopping was usually a smooth process, as typically participants didn't buy too much from the refill zone, with even the regular users only sticking to a few staple items such as pastas or tea. So this meant storage and cupboard organisation didn't really have to change, but participants did note that this would require some more thought if they were to branch out and buy more items, presenting a barrier for participants to get a bit more stuck into the refill zone and swap out more products for unpackaged versions. It would also likely require more investment in containers, particularly if products have to be stored on countertops. And this is where the aesthetics of the container are more important to participants, leading to a potential increase in price tag. So during phase one, we found that typically the decision to purchase packaged items is usually associated with pitfalls experienced in the refill zone. For example, required or desired products being out of stock, experiencing some technical difficulties, or in some cases, participants simply just forgot their containers, and in which case they were unlikely to purchase more containers versus just picking up a packaged alternative. Essentially, we found that as this sort of perceived or actual effort increases when the participants encountered some barriers, their initial motivations for using the refill zone are then often unable to counteract this bad experience, which results in participants going back to packaged goods. So even if there may be solutions to these barriers, participants want their shopping trip to be quick and straightforward. So any extra effort required is undesired. So to summarise that phase one, we identified that the barriers to refill and reuse are twofold. So personal, being feelings, values and emotions, and practical, focusing more on the actual practicalities and environment of the refill zone. So during the refill process, participants felt like they sometimes had a lack of obvious support, and the dominant emotion which took over were concerns about something going wrong or making a mess, and then ultimately feeling embarrassed in public. This was most notable when encountering technical difficulties or seeing others experience problems or breakdowns, resulting in users lacking some confidence to try the refill zone or deciding they would not try it again. In addition, these feelings of uncertainty were also in part driven by more practical considerations such as price and containers, specifically uncertainty as to how much purchasing products from the refill zone will cost, as well as the initial investment in containers. So these practical concerns can also feed worry, as there is overlap between the personal and practical barriers at fixture. So I'll now pass you on to Leah to talk you through how we turned these barriers that we developed into interventions.
Great. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Polly. Hi, my name's Leah Wistrand, and I'm a special advisor here at WRAP, working on projects that involve changing citizens' behaviour. So I'm really pleased to take you through how we develop the interventions, and then Polly can take you through the findings. Firstly, just quickly, why interventions? In short, it's because the process is designed, intervention design process is designed to be citizen-centric. That is, the citizens is at the heart of the design of everything. And intervention design is grounded in behavioral science theory, with the ultimate outcome of a person starting a new behavior or modifying or stopping an existing behavior. The design process also helps us understand how people make decisions, what is required to change behavior, and gives us a framework for designing interventions. So the process provides solutions that are evidence-led, citizen-centric, and focus on changing behavior. And in short, this is the process that we did. We did some research. We uncovered some barriers, which you've just heard, and some enablers. We prioritized where to focus based on this, and then developed the interventions from there. And these interventions, you see an arrow going back to the barriers. That is what we are trying to do. We're trying to remove the barriers to the behavior enactment or support enablers. And then we undertook some more research to see what happened. So following the phase one research, we had 2 workshops to develop the interventions. So in workshop 1, we looked at the barriers enablers from a behavior change model perspective, and we used COM-B, which in short, if you don't know, is B stands for behavior. So does someone have the capability, the opportunity, or the motivation to perform the behavior? Using this process, this helped prioritize our behavioral objectives and where on the customer journey to focus. And in our case, we concluded that the interventions might operate better at the early stages of behavior adoption. So that's where we decided to focus. In workshop 2, We took the behavioural priorities, which I'll talk to you in the next slide, and where to focus, and we used the EAST behaviour change intervention framework to guide intervention development. We decided that after this, in workshop 2, we decided a 2-stage intervention process. The first process of interventions was to ensure or optimize existing processes in store. So this was things like provide clear instructions on machines and ensure colleagues are trained and informed, optimize in-store signage and ensure we have good stock levels during busy periods. And then from there, once we had all those optimization interventions, we then developed interventions based on 3 key priorities. And these were: make the experience fun and enjoyable, combat uncertainty and apprehension, and you'll recognize why we've chosen these from some of the barriers that Polly mentioned earlier, and help customers understand price differences. Now, as you can imagine, in a workshop, we came up with loads of ideas to meet these objectives, but we can't do them all. So we had to filter them to what was practical, what was feasible, and what was impactful. So we focused in store rather than on the journey to store or on home, and getting people to use the zone in the first place. It's not that the other stages were not important, but this is where we thought were best use of our resources. So we wanted to keep people using the zone in order to create habits, as well as getting them to use it in the first place. So I will take you through what we did under the headings above, and then demonstrate how these what we did also aligns with the EAST behaviour change intervention development framework. So what did we do to make the experience fun and enjoyable? We did a month of activity, which is designed to create a buzz in the refill zone and promote ongoing commitment. And we did this through giveaways. For example, Quaker Oats handed out free refillable jars and tote bags. Dr. Oetker had a sample giveaways and also a tote bag. Asda had free refill bags. We undertook some games. Taylors of Harrogate, spin the wheel to win prizes, and Unilever, spin the wheel if you purchased a refill, and you get a chance to win a prize. Asda had a colleague competition for those who refilled during the month. Make it engaging and provide information. Asda had colleagues on the shop floor talking to people. Tilda customer engagement about the sustainability aspect of Tilda lines. Their reusable tins had measures on the side to help with dispensing, and Dr. Oetker had an engagement stand. So we had a lot of people in there making it fun and engaging. Right, combat uncertainty and apprehension. This is about providing reassuring messages and kind of leaning into the risk of embarrassment, acknowledging it, communicating that everybody is nervous for the first time they use the refill zone. So you can see here, we're trying to remove emotional barriers. So we offered help and support. You'll see one of the blinker signs there. It says they're confused, ask for help. We gave surety that people were also using the refill zone. So it was normal, it wasn't embarrassing. And we've got signs that says more and more people are using the refill zone. And that's sort of social signaling that you know, it's okay, it's fine, other people do it. And we normalized making a mistake. Here we have on the right-hand side an oops box. So don't worry if you spill at the refill. So you know what, go on, have a go. Great, good on you. And if you make a mistake, it doesn't matter. So making it okay. And the third one, help customers understand price differences. So we had signage in the packaged goods aisles, encouraging people to visit the refill zone and advising that the equivalent products will be cheaper in the refill zone. And this gave clear knowledge to people to help them make decisions and removed uncertainty about potentially being more expensive in the refill zone. And this was on the shelf barkers, and a barker is a sign that's on a shelf. So we put them there. We put price motivation messaging on floor stickers. As well as I'm just checking my slides, not moving forward. There we go. And also on signage in the refill zones. You could say pennies and plastics refill your boots. So we're helping customers with price. Now, if we go back to the same interventions that I've just shown you, and we're from a behavioral science perspective using the EAST framework, and EAST is when you design interventions, you want to make them easy, attractive, social, and timely. behavior change is hard. People are habitual because our brains are wired that way. But I'm going to take you through how we did this. So, well, sorry, here's the East one. We made it easy. You can see here, let's refill. 1, 2, 3 instructions, very easy. I don't know why, but human brains work much better when we have bullet points or 1, 2, 3. It's a very normal thing to do, and very clear signage there. So we made it easy for people to do, and the hoppers are very easy to use. We made it attractive. And making it attractive means grabbing attention and making it appealing. So getting attention, well, it's well laid out, it's signposted, it's noticeable, and it's different. And what is appealing to one person may not be appealing to another. So we have 2 different kind of motivational messages here. Someone might find it appealing to save money, and some save the environment. Social, we're human, we're very social. We constantly look for social signals as to what is normal. We always look around, see what other people's doing, so we don't feel left out or the odd one out. So having people around, games, creating a buzz. We've dropped that messaging in there, more and more people, little social breadcrumbs in the environment for people to find and follow, to let them know that what they're doing is good and it's okay and other people are doing it. And lastly, not to forget, timely. When you do an intervention, it has to be delivered at or around the time a behavior is occurring or about to occur. It's kind of making it salient. So we had signage as you entered the store, as you walked around the store. There was an A board in the store, in the zone. Aprons for staff were provided. And while selecting from the shelf, when you're in the process of making a decision of the behavior that you're going to do, we put a message there that it might be cheaper elsewhere at the moment of decision making. So it might be cheaper in the refill zone. And I'm going to hand you back to Polly now, who will take you through what we found.
Thank you, Leah. So phase 2. So during this stage, we were testing those interventions we developed and getting some feedback from a new set of participants, just to get their feedback and sort of see whether we were able to help overcome those barriers in any way. So qualitative data was gathered, similar to phase 1, just to understand the extent of any change in behaviour and any other relevant constructs, such as attitudes towards the refill zone. So specifically, phase 2, we were trying to explore those emotions and feelings using the refill zone, both before, during, and after a visit, and to gain a better understanding of how our participants found the experience of using the refill zone during our 6-week intervention period. So we wanted to identify the level of success really our interventions had on tackling those core barriers, as well as just pinpointing any missed opportunities that we could learn from. So phase 2 was conducted in the York store. This is because its slightly larger refill zone was more suitable for the placement of interventions. All of the fieldwork took place between April and July of this year. And as I just mentioned, it was a different sample to those that took part in phase 1. However, they were similarly organised into the 3 different categories that were also used in phase 1 of current, potential and lapsed users. Citizens were given tasks to do to try out the refill zone and document their experience via a series of video diaries they recorded on their phones, so they could capture their in-the-moment feelings as they shopped. This was followed up by in-depth Zoom interviews. So we were able to recap participants' experiences, as well as gauge their recall of varying interventions and get some of their feedback on those before exploring their likelihood of using the refill zone again. In terms of the interventions, we found their level of success did vary quite a lot, and we determined success by how spontaneous the recall was during those final interviews with participants, or if we needed to prompt them to remember what they saw in store, as well as their general feelings and opinions towards the intervention. Generally, what we found was that the prominent size location, or the clarity of signs, or reduced impact, and would be areas where there could be improvement. So the intervention that we found was the most successful was actually the chalk A-board and the free bag, which were highly recalled and most positively spoken about by participants. The A-board, we found it grabbed attention because of how much it stood out from typical other in-store point of sale. And participants obviously also enjoyed the freebie, the free bag, as it allowed them an additional container for trying out refill. So these chalk A-boards were handwritten by Asda staff to promote the refill zone, and we had key messaging including save plastic and pennies. So as Leah mentioned, speaking to the environment, messaging and pricing benefits simultaneously. So we found also the pricing comparisons versus the packaged items really helped citizens better understand the value and compare pricing of the refill zone to pre-packaged items. So whilst these were actually not a planned intervention for the month of activity, they proved to be the most successful in terms of the level of unprompted recall and positivity shown by participants. Those interventions that were somewhat successful had a sort of varying levels of recall were the giveaways and the games, the activities that took place in store. Participants who did encounter these were extremely positive with what they had to say. We found that those who were not necessarily in store during the appropriate times, so weren't able to see them, they were able to provide their perspective sort of retrospectively and could see the potential in this type of activity. Many felt that it would help drive them to try out the refill zone. The key takeaways of these activities were really positive, with the participants being excited that they had an opportunity to win or get a freebie, which drove interest to find out more. Moreover, just the presence of staff and brand representatives at the refill zone during these times created a nice buzz of an atmosphere, and this helped to reduce the apprehension of using reuse and refill, allowing the participants also the opportunity to interact with someone in the know if they had any questions or concerns. Those interventions that were a bit less successful, but have potential with a few tweaks, were the price and environmental barcodes. So recall of these interventions was mixed, although participants recalled the price message barcodes slightly more frequently than the packaging barcodes. We believe the big stop messaging was a big reason for this, as that direct messaging really grabbed participants' attention. However, the feedback on environmental messaging was also positive, and it struck an emotional chord with the participants. But overall, the feedback we received suggests that these might have had a greater impact if they were bigger and stood out more to grab the attention of passing shoppers. In terms of the chunked instructions, participants did have really positive feedback in terms of offering a step-by-step guidance on how to use a refill zone. This held great appeal with the participants to help overcome the uncertainty that they face when they first visit the refill zone. However, some did find that the chunked instructions could have a bit more clarity. For example, when stating "weigh empty," some participants were uncertain of what was being asked of them. And then some interventions did unfortunately miss their opportunity and didn't quite have the impact we hoped. So first of all, the floor stickers. These were actually removed partway through the intervention period due to peeling and presenting a trip hazard. So in a way, it is hard to measure the success level of these. However, actually, we found that some reflective feedback from participants suggests that they thought they were actually COVID stickers and for this reason ignored them. Next, the oops box. We found that this received little spontaneous recall. Many felt the box actually blended into the display and they didn't realise what its purpose was. However, they found the concept of an oops box when it was explained to them really appealing, and they thought it would provide encouragement to participants to try the refill zone, and that they expected this would have then been placed underneath the hoppers where they felt that spillage was more likely to take place. Next, the motivational blinkers. We did find that these also receive little spontaneous recall. Many felt the box sort of many felt that they did have a slight recall of the coffee and the pasta imagery that was included, but they could not remember really what the signs said or where they were placed. That being said, they did speak positively again about the environmental messaging, and they thought it could kind of on reflection positively endorse a decision to use refill zone and kind of be an ongoing motivation for current users. Finally, the staff aprons. So these were actually not visible during the intervention period, so we couldn't measure the success of these directly. However, some participants did actually report seeing T-shirts worn by staff promoting the refill zone, and so they really like this idea, which does suggest some proof of concept. However, these were typically situated towards the checkout, by which time they've sort of missed the opportunity to direct assistance to the refill zone. So overall, we found that phase 2 really uncovered this element of once you know, you know. This continues to play out with shoppers using the refill zone at Asda York, with most finding that the process is actually easier than they expected, and after the first experience, they know what they're doing and they feel quite confident to try it again. So the majority were very positive towards the refill zone and more positive than they were before they took part in the research, with 19 actually out of the 22 participants who completed the pilot stating that they would return. However, it's likely more of a case of as and when rather than a complete overhaul of their shopping habits. Participants do not feel the need to purchase from the refill zone during every visit, based on the purchase frequency of their refill top-up items and typically just sticking to a few staples. Unfortunately, there was exception from a minority who remained slightly negative towards the refill zone, and this was due to sort of specific and unfortunate experiences. So products they wanted to purchase being out of stock, the weighing scales of the computer system not working properly, or staff just not being on hand at the time to support when they encountered issues. All in all, though, we found phase 2 was really valuable in allowing us detailed insight into participants' shopping habits and a better understanding of what works, what does not, and why. So we'll be better positioned to support shoppers in their transition to reuse and refill. So I will now pass you back to Rachel to talk us through the final conclusions.
Thank you, Polly and Leah. Just before I move on to the next set of slides, just been looking at the chat, so thank you for people who are in the chat. Just a quick reminder to use the drop down of everyone if you want everyone to see your chat. There's been some discussion around the journeys to and from home, around remembering containers, and a conversation on containers. And I think, you know, we had these conversations around that whole shopping journey when we started this project, but the interventions that we decided to make were governed by all sorts of decisions. One practical, one budget, one timing. Also, we were trying to focus on the journey of relatively new people to refill, the beginning of that behavioural formation. So it's not that we didn't recognise the others, and absolutely, you know, we recognise from this that more work needs to be done, but we were hoping that this provides a really good insight into how people actually think and feel about refill. So thank you for all those comments and chat comments, so keep them coming. And I just think I'd like to sum up what we've seen. So, yes, Susie's designed A board was
It's my best work.
I know, it was fantastic. And, you know, it's one of those things that, you know, these kind of projects, which we're very grateful, give you the chance to try things and try things away from the norm and see how they work. And as we can see, some things worked and some things didn't. But we've learned along the way in doing that. So bringing this together, I think there were a number of key points, and I go back to the fact that this was qualitative in nature. It's about people and how they feel, both their emotional brain and their logical brain. And obviously the emotional side is coming through quite strongly in this research. You know, making the experience fun and enjoyable was a really clear thing that came out in this, you know, and we did this through a number of interventions. Obviously, the implications of continuing this and for everybody to do this, there are things to consider, but it was really appreciated. So that brands creating fun atmosphere was really important to people. But equally, as Leah pointed out, everybody's different. Some people want easy convenience. So I think, you know, one thing to consider is the profile of people using the refill zone in a particular store and seeing what they respond to and what they want. So having that local context is really important. So the other really important thing, the thing that I guess struck me personally as the biggest sort of emotional thing, is combating uncertainty and apprehension. You know, we've been shopping in a certain way for quite a few decades. We are really asking people to do something new, and that newness brings a little bit of apprehension of getting it wrong. So I think addressing that through a number of ways through the intervention showed that staff presence can be really impactful, but absolutely appreciate that's a challenge for obviously store management. You know, the oops box, you know, was positively fed back on, even though the execution wasn't actually there. And I think, you know, having something to show that it's okay to make a mistake and, you know, don't be embarrassed is important. And in the report, you'll see some of the, let's say, more risky messaging we looked at around this. So as I said before, we had a massive list of things that we could do. So we provided some of those ideas in the report. And then price. Obviously, price is really important, but there's lots of elements to this price. And I think, you know, people are still unsure, you know, even with some of the executions of the implementation of the interventions, that direct price difference between refill and package. And it's really important to try and work on that. The A board, the chalk A board, Susie's best work, you know, went part the way of doing that, but of course it couldn't have everything on there. But equally, this is something where you take people through their journey in their behaviors. Once you've used it once or maybe twice, you start to get a better understanding of it. So, you know, it's that we focused on that beginning part of the journey, and we know getting price right was important at the beginning. That might be something further down the line where, as the discussion is going, containers become more of an issue, and remembering containers. So just some additional insights. You know, ultimately participants felt that the refill zone was easier to use than they first thought. So getting people to use it for the first time is really key, because once you get a positive experience, then you get a positive emotion. People like the range of products that are available in the York store. They could buy what they need, which is obviously a key important point, I think, especially now in obviously being pushed on cost of living. They can buy what they need. And yes, they do like the environmental benefit of less packaging, but this is more a post rationalization of feeling good. It's not a main driver necessarily for doing it. And we see again that shopping experience needs to be quick and efficient. That needs to be free of hiccups. And obviously I know the challenges, and this is a new technology and a new way of shopping. So, you know, we are finding our way. But after the interventions, most people said they would carry on using it. Obviously, we are not going back ourselves, but hopefully they will continue those behaviours. So some things to think about for everybody on the call if you are introducing refill and reuse into the retail experience, or considering how to. I think there's 3 key points which you can probably see from the previous slides. You know, make pricing clear, whichever way is possible to do that, and each store will be different and different approaches. you know, there need to be techniques to understand those price differences. And I think for me personally, working with Asda and Unilever, it struck me how not straightforward this is. So really appreciate work that was done to try and work with this. You need to highlight that the products are cheaper, and people can't necessarily visualize. Everyone's been buying a packet of something for quite a long time, so visualizing what they want to buy is really difficult. So techniques around that are important. You need to tackle the people's apprehension and uncertainty. You know, this can be very practical things by step-by-step guidance, but equally more emotional things about creating a buzz and providing reassurance. And finally, make it visible. You know, one of the points I think Polly said is that people liked the way the communications stood out from the general communications in store. The fact it was something different. So having that signage right so that it stands out and you can really see it from the point of entry from the store. So I'm hoping that's giving you a flavour of the results. Like I said, it was you're the first people to see this. There is a report with loads of information in, lots more detail, and that report will be available early next week. What we're going to do is package up the recording from this webinar and the report and send an email to those of you who are registered. So watch this space early this week. But now I'd like to bring back on screen, as it were, Susie and Katie to just have a quick discussions with our key partners that actually, you know, made it happen. You know, we did all the research, but without them to actually put it on the shop floor and make it happen, this wouldn't have happened. And it was quite an interesting experience for us all. So I'd just like to sort of have a chat to you. I guess first, Susie, just really if you can sort of talk about why you got involved in this project in the first place.
Yeah, no problem at all. So I think we were approached to take part in the project around about this time last year, I think it was. By that time, we'd been working on Refill, probably, I think, full time for about a year. And I guess it's really easy when you're so absorbed and passionate about something to not always see it in the same way that others do. So when the opportunity did crop up for us to take part in this project, we were just really so welcoming of it to get that external point of view. And it wasn't just to access all of the rich insight that you've just gone through today, but it was really to get access to the experts as well. I suppose it's a little bit like the Dragon's Den TV show, isn't it? The funding is one thing, but it's that access to experts that's just as valuable, if not more. I mean, you guys at RAP have been around for years and years. You've got a wealth of experience. The guys from Behaviour Change are just fantastically knowledgeable about what makes customers tick. And of course, having Unilever on board too was just the icing on the cake. They're obviously one of the world's biggest brands. They've got a wealth of knowledge about shopper behaviour, marketing, and so much more. I mean, it was practically the dream team. So we were really excited by it. We just saw it as an opportunity that we couldn't really miss. Do you know what too as well, we've always said that reuse and refill, or any project like this aiming to do the right thing, should never really be about a competitive advantage. And I do know, thankfully, a lot of other retailers feel exactly the same way about that too, particularly on something so new as refill. And I think that really the only way we are going to get better at this together is through collaboration and projects like this and sharing of knowledge and ideas. So we were happy to take part, and yes, of course, we were up for it.
Thank you, Susie. Yeah, so it was a great experience, I think, both personally, wasn't it? It was hard at times and fraught sometimes. A lot of
fun too. Some of the ideas, oh my goodness.
Yeah, have a look at the report for some of the interesting messaging we came up with.
The sexual innuendo approach was my favourite one. If only we could have got that through our brand team.
So yeah, it was reference for you know, doing things for the first time. Let's just say that we didn't make it to the cut. So yeah, Katie, I'd like to go to the same question, sort of idea to you. Why did Unilever get involved in this?
Yeah, no, I mean, I completely echo a lot of what Susie said. I think there's two main reasons for Unilever. I think, you know, one is we really take it quite seriously that we've got this enormous plastic pollution problem at hand, and Unilever's made some pretty ambitious targets, quite public targets on changing those to be able to really create a waste-free future. So I think anything around challenging ourselves in new business models, rethinking the approach to packaging, rethinking the approach to how shoppers shop, we need to really shift our thinking on from use and dispose to use, refill, repeat, and we're really excited to do anything in that space. And so I think from an insight point of view, we're learning around that, but we're also learning it from shoppers about their behaviour change, whether it is in store or at home, like the conversations that we've been having in the chat this morning. So I think anything to be able to spend time, energy, resources around to better understand that model is a really good and worthwhile investment for us. We need to be able to do that. And then secondly, I think just to echo that collaboration aspect of the dream team coming together, as Susie put it, I think, you know, working with Asda, working with RAP, it meant that we could take this challenge holistically. You know, we all come with our different viewpoint. Unilever as manufacturers with our supply chain, Asda with their supply chain from a retailer point of view, and then as Susie said, all the expertise that RAP brings with their partners from behaviour change to be able to tackle the problem from different viewpoints. And that's important because as we test and learn, we need to make it happen at scale, and it needs to work for the whole chain. Otherwise, we're not going to get anywhere.
So thank you, Katie. I mean, I don't know if you can build on that, and you know, what has been the value for you in being involved in this project?
I mean, there's an enormous amount of value, but I'll try and keep it quite tight. I think, you know, the idea of refill, returnable packaging, it isn't new. You know, we all sat in those workshops and we talked about milkmen, we talked about bar products being delivered to the front door when I was growing up and stuff like that. But delivering it at scale to shoppers in these categories is new. And it's different because it's a part of their everyday shop. Like you said, we've had these new shopping behaviours for decades now, and people are very entrenched in what they want to do and how they shop. So it's a massive challenge, and not just for manufacturers, but retailers as well, and for shoppers. So we wanted to be able to learn, test and adapt. So I think we got a lot of value from that. And as Sue said, we've been on a refill journey since about 2019, and we gathered insights in that space, but they were more focused around the motivations that people had, the ways that the categories we should play in. You know, we have a really broad footprint at Unilever. Where should we really focus our energy? And so the phase one part of this really allowed us to gain a deeper insight into those and better understand the barriers that we hadn't previously been looking at. But I'd say we got an enormous amount of value from the test and learn approach of these interventions. I think behaviour change, behavioural science as a thought process is quite new. It's quite engaging. There's a lot going on in this space. So flipping the coin, so to say, around how we can increase participation from a behavioural point of view meant we could take all of those insights that we had and apply them to that ongoing challenge to really encourage as many citizens as possible to join us in this journey and make that lasting change.
Thank you, Katie. And the same sort of question to you really, Susie, is, you know, what value did this project bring to Asda?
Yeah, I mean, it's totally brilliant, and it's a little bit overwhelming at the same time. We've definitely felt like the popular kids when it comes to our refill zone. It's just been so fantastic as to how much interest it's had across the industry. And we have had quite a few organisations and businesses want to reach out, offer services, like that's data, insight, for example. But what really stood out differently about this project and where that real value was yes, definitely that rich source of customer insight that we would get. But also what I really liked about the aim of this project, that it wasn't just focused on coming up with where the pinch points were or the problem areas or which type of shoppers were using it. It was also to come up with ideas about how to make it better. So how could we improve it and what were the solutions? And we had a lot of confidence. We knew that both RAP, Behaviour Change and Unilever would have absolutely tons of ideas to bring to the table, and they definitely did. We just touched upon earlier, some of them were just totally out there. I'm not going to lie, a little bit bonkers. If we had landed them, they might have got us in a little bit of hot water with our store teams and our legal teams. But hey, in a project like this, no idea is a bad idea, right? And then a couple of other bits that we really valued. So the customer insight was fantastic. The guys at RAP and DGS did a super job at getting under the skin of what's going on in our customers' minds. And what I really liked about that was it wasn't just the experience at the fixture, which we kind of had been focused on in the past, but it was also that at-home shopping experience. So before they go shopping, and then again at home when they're unpacking their shopping. So I know it wasn't a focus of the trial, but we've definitely got some rich insight into what's going on there as well, which was really useful. I don't necessarily think that the at fixture insight told us anything we didn't already expect, to be honest, but having that formal insight to hand did really help us internally when having conversations to make things happen. And the fact that we get to be here today as well, which is a real honour. So thank you everybody for dialing in today. I'm just going to retouch upon that collaboration point as well. It's just so important to help Refill take off. And we just hope that today we've inspired some others to get involved, and that there's something hopefully in here that you can learn, whether that's what to do or just as importantly, what not to do.
Thank you to you both. And I guess I said at the beginning that this was a qualitative study. You know, this was about people's emotions, how they felt, how they reacted. But I guess there's lots of people on the call, and there is information in the report. But the big question is, I guess, starting with you, Susie, did you see any changes in impact in terms of sales and purchases? I guess that's a big question for a lot of people.
Golden question, isn't it? We have a drum roll.
Yeah.
Well, the answer is yes, we absolutely did. And I really enjoyed pressing refresh on our sales report on a daily basis and watching the numbers go up. I felt a little bit like our new owner Mossin when he's bought a new chain of businesses, only maybe just with a few less zeros. But yes, we definitely did see an improvement. Our biggest increase that we saw was when the interventions first landed. So that was at the beginning of April. What we saw there was that transactions were 40% higher than the average for Q1. So that was a real improvement. Then also we saw an uplift of 26% of sales. So that's cash sales across April and May. So all good news there. But we didn't really need to wait for the reports to come in because we could see it happening live in store. I remember as I was putting the barkers out, so barkers are a piece of POS that sit on the shelf edge. And I was putting them out down the pre-packed cereal aisle in front of Kellogg's cornflakes, and a chap came over and said, "What's all this all about?" I was like, "Well, do you know you could save X amount on your Kellogg's cornflakes if you go and buy it in the refill zone?" He went, "Oh, can I?" Went over, bought something, came back and thanked me for getting a bargain. So we could see it happening. I tell you what too, we normally find it a bit of a headache in store if customers dump unwanted stuff, if they've changed their minds, the pre-packed stuff. But oh my goodness, did it make me smile after seeing more and more pre-packed, so normal single-use packed bags of rice and pasta being dumped at our refill zone because people had chosen to shop refill instead. So we couldn't have been happier with the impacts that the interventions had.
Thank you, Susie. Yeah, and over to you, Katie, as well. You know, and what impact did it have for your products?
Yeah, so I mean, good news all round, which is the great thing, isn't it? So I think the 2 points where we really wanted to measure is obviously during the specific interventions that we backed behind the resourcing on our products. So we did have some of our colleagues in store over those interventions to make it fun and enjoyable, as we saw in the presentation. And actually during that time period, we saw a 2.5 increase in participation throughout all of our products. So really good, really strong. I think we know that those sorts of activities can increase participation on non-refill as well. So, you know, if you're doing any kind of shopping marketing in stores, you generally do get an uplift. But I think it was really positive to see that we saw that continue into something that is so new and different, right? This is about engaging people into something that they've never had any interaction with before. So to continue to see those uplifts is really strong. And then I think are more ongoing, which is obviously probably really important. I think, and that's really positive, is that we did see a longer term impact. So following the interventions, so for the month following, which is when we had the data for at the time of production, we saw a 10% increase on our leading brand in the trials, which was Purcell. And I think it's really great to know that, you know, even if it's just those small interventions, you continue to see the longer term impact on making them. So it's not just the in-moment uplift, it is an ongoing behaviour as well. And actually it wasn't about repeat purchases, it was about new purchases. So we are still bringing in new people by doing these.
Oh, thank you. So positives all round. But let's maybe go back to maybe the realities. As we work together, there were challenges. So I think I'll go to you first, Katie. What challenges did you encounter during this project, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so I think, as we've said, there are lots of challenges. I'll focus probably just on two this morning. So one, focused around us being a Unilever, the big ships of the world when it comes to manufacturing. And then secondly, around how we pivoted during the point of research. So first and foremost, Unilever is a big ship. This is very much not business as usual for us. Businesses like Unilever, for those that are on the call that aren't familiar, but we're very good at size and scale. We are made for size and scale. And millions of people buy our products every day. So having a more agile approach has been really, really important so we can pivot and learn. And I think at the beginning, that was harder. We had to adapt, but we've moved now. We have a dedicated team of people that are working in this space. We've ironed out the creases, so to say, that we've now kind of got a model that works for us and works for Unilever. So we're really excited to continue to kind of do that, break the mold of how pilots like this work for businesses like us and adopt that internally, to really continue to embrace that trial and learn and adopt approach that we've since built. And then I think on that is that, the phase 1 findings were really pretty clear, and they built on our own insight that the refill in store machines can add friction. So whether that's not for all shoppers, of course, it's not for everyone, but for some, it's more than they're used to, especially in this retail environment. When people are going into a supermarket, and as Leah mentioned, it's habitual. The shopping's done on autopilot. They know what they're buying. They know the brands they buy. And they are wanting generally to be in and out of store as quickly as possible. And so when you're trying to get them to change their behaviour, you're asking them to do something really quite big. And with those barriers that were highlighted from the machines, it's really hard to do that, because some of those interventions needed to be somebody at the store, right? They need to be there all of the time if the machine breaks or if a consumer or a shopper is confused. And that has some challenges on an ongoing model. We can't afford to have people in store all of the time. And especially if we're looking to do this at scale, right? We're in it to try and make big changes. This is a pilot on a bigger problem. And so if you're looking to scale up to hundreds or thousands of stores, not just for an Asda, but actually for the whole retail environment, that's hard to do. So we had to pivot. So we pivoted to the pre-fill bottles during the pilot. So that's more of the return on the go model rather than the refill on the go model from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And I think having such an agile team allowed us to overcome those problems that we've encountered in terms of making that pivot.
So thank you, Katie. I'll come to you in a moment, Susie, but I think my reflection on this, obviously going in, being from the citizens team, we were obviously very, very focused on the citizens side. And that's what, the report is focused on. But it's clear there's lots more, let's say, retailer environment or operational supply chain learnings, which of course, will feed in as RAP and as you as members into the UK Plastics Pact in the journey. So I think, the report is very citizens focused. So I think, obviously that focuses on their barriers, but equally we recognise, retailers and brands have barriers as well, and it is work that will continue. So yeah, over to Susie. Obviously from a retailer environment and this project, what were your main challenges and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so the trial was a real success, but there definitely were some challenges in terms of how to land it. And I think I would echo Katie's points around Unilever is a giant ship, as are Asda is a giant ship. And I think that sometimes people who haven't worked in retail or in manufacture have the perception that landing change is quite straightforward and quick to do. And I think especially for retailers, there's a perception that we have magic wands that we can just wave over stuff and make it happen. But the reality can be quite different, especially for a small team like myself, a sustainability team. Our business is absolutely huge. There's 4,000 people working in head office alone. The whole system is pretty much set up to land activity in store in a very controlled manner by multiple teams. Most of our stakeholders are pretty much geared up to mainly just deliver consistent tasks and processes. not just in one store, but all of them at the time. There's definitely a reason for this. You know, it keeps us safe, it keeps us legal, it keeps us aligned to business strategy. We have to be really careful about interfering too much with our stores as well, which are really tightly managed. And I think there's just a challenge around resource as well. We rely on other stakeholder teams to help us. And they're usually up to their eyeballs in landing very big other things. Like, for example, when we were trying to land this project in store, it was exactly around the same time that we were landing our new Just Essentials range. You might have seen it, the yellow packaging that's caused so much either positive news or controversy. We had Locked and Dropped promise that was going on at the same time, and the launch of our new app. I mean, I could go on. And at the same time, we were then asking the same guys to help us on a one-store trial. So that was a little bit tricky. So we did land some really cool stuff, but it was really quick versus the normal process. It was hugely quick. It was about a third of the time it would normally take. We were trying to land it in just one store. It wasn't aligned to any of our usual processes or ways of working, not to brand guidelines. So yeah, that bit was a little bit challenging. I think our design director nearly had a heart attack when he saw that we were wanting to use a baby seal on a piece of POS. So we did have to use our charm and be a little bit cheeky to get things done. I mentioned earlier too that some of the ideas started off as being a little bit out there. And as much as I'll take the kind of ask forgiveness and not permission approach on some things, a bit like the chalkboard, we do just have to be a bit careful in a store environment around landing trials like this to be all over the kind of sensible things. Is it safe? Is it legal? Who's going to install it? Who's going to clean it? All that kind of boring stuff, but it is important. The great news is, though, that we did get it through. All of the individuals and teams that we do work with in head office are massively stacked out on other stuff, that is true, but they are very personally passionate and enthusiastic about what we're trying to do here. So we did manage to get it through in the end, and yes, I did get in trouble for the seal, but I've still got a job, so I guess I got away with that one. I don't think I would have got away with the sexual innuendo one though, Rich.
No, thank you for you both. Yeah, we, recognizing the challenges is part of the learning journey, and hopefully this demonstrates that those challenges are big but can be overcome, and if they are overcome, you get results and also more learning. So it feeds back in that feedback loop. So thank you for this. So I guess I if you can, I'm going to ask you a quick task, whether you can do this, is starting with you, Susie. What were your top 3 takeaways from these pilots, and why? If you can summarize 3.
Top 3, I mean, there were so many, it's hard to choose, but I think what really is resonating now after the project is something that we've got a new chairman. He's the Right Honourable Stuart Rose. I don't know if you know him. He's basically a retail god, and he at the minute keeps championing across our business that we all need to get back to customer basics. And it did make me think about how we can apply that, or how we need to apply that to refill too. I mean, you could listen to the man for hours. He's absolutely fascinating, but he talks about good retail and boiling down to kind of 3 essential customer needs. Their value, convenience, and either quality or service. And then how we as a retailer have to get the right balance of those, but without one compromising the other. And that's I think the key here. And I think that's the takeaway. I think what we really need to be mindful of is that, yes, it's super important to try and make that refill journey as easy to use as possible. Remember, help customers remember to bring back your own containers, give them a really good user experience. Yes, that is all dead important. But I think what we really need to come to terms with, and that's probably one of my main reflections after the trial, is just that refill and reuse will not be more convenient in even the medium or the long term than grabbing a bag of pre-packed rice or pasta off the shelf and shoving it in your trolley. It's just not. I think we've known for a long time as a retailer that customers are willing to pay more for convenience. But what that also means on the flip side, though, is that they expect to pay less for inconvenience. So I think that's my biggest takeout, that we're just not doing enough on value to offset that higher inconvenience that inevitably is going to be there. And when I talk about value, I know price was touched upon as part of the presentation. I don't just mean offering really good prices versus pre-pack, because that's what we already have, that's what we've done already. I just think it's very difficult for customers to work out. I mean, how are you supposed to work out at the fixture that 65.2 pence per 100 grams, I mean, I think that was a mistake, in the refill zone is any better or worse value than a pack? In the cereal aisle, for example, that's on a 2 for £4 link save, I mean, after a few coffees, I couldn't even work that one out, or even with a calculator. I just don't know how we're expecting our poor customers to be able to do that. So I think what we need to really focus on is, yes, cracking value, but also giving that value reassurance. I think that's the key. And that's something that's going to be a really big focus for us at the moment. And we do hope to keep building on the back of what we've done so far, so that we can go again on this very soon. I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Susie. So yeah, I'll pose the same challenge to Katie. Your sort of top three, how would you sum this all up?
Yeah, so I think I'll try and think of some different ones than Susie and keep my focus on the ones that are less overlap. But I think so. One, I think the role that trusted brands have in this process. So and then I think about the value proposition, but I'll come at it from a slightly different angle with our shift into pre-fill and return. And then I think just elaborating on that convenience part, especially for brands. So I think taking trusted brands as a kind of core of that is that, you know, Persil was our best brand in this trial, and it continues to be particularly successful throughout the Unilever trials that we've got ongoing. And they are familiar, they are trusted, household favourites, and they are going to be able to kind of be the leaders to be able to encourage shoppers to participate. You know, that trust can transfer across depending on different roles that you're doing, because the products remain the same. And I think that's really important for consumers when you're trying something new. You want to have that justification that it's the same thing I've always bought. And I think we need to learn to do that to grow, refill and reuse. And one of the things, also a challenge, but I guess takeaway is that if you're doing it with one thing, it's not always going to work because people have their preferences. So actually the role that trusted brands of a wider variation can have. So for us, that might be a different variant of Persil or a different brand and a different detergent, to be able to increase propensity to buy from a wider audience because people have their preferences. So I think looking at the role that different brands can play in this space for us. I think from a value proposition point of view and communicating that value proposition, it's absolutely essential. Just to echo Susie, I think pricing is one aspect of that, but especially when you're asking people, even just in Susie's dry goods kind of example, you know, pasta versus pasta in a refill, actually when you're starting to put on a bottle on top of the normal product, and then this is what your bottle costs and this is what your product costs, again, you're going completely out of the norm to make people understand very complicated processes. So I think, and that's, you know, more true potentially for those that don't buy into sustainable choices already, but even those that do buy into sustainable choices, that's really quite complicated to do. So understanding both the economic and benefits of that is a big thing. And, you know, from a communications point of view, it goes beyond just pricing. I think we took a lot of value learnings away from how you communicate in this. So making sure it's consumer friendly language, it's really upfront, it's that 3-step processes that Leah mentioned, as well as the clarity that we've had the conversations about pricing. And then I think from a convenience point of view, you know, we spent a lot of time in those workshops to develop the BCIs, focusing on those different models, and especially in that East model to make it easy. Convenience is really, really clear. So I think for us, when we're now moving into the future, we will be focusing on the most convenient aspect. And I think when you're talking in commoditized categories such like ours, you know, you are going into a place where you need to break the habits. And so making it easy as possible. And in our model, it's just pick up and carry on. It's almost bringing it back that you're asking for that behavior change now. So we'll continue to explore more in that space.
Yeah. And can I just interject on
yeah, sure.
So Katie mentioned a lot about pricing on bottles as well, and I talked a little bit mainly about the dry refill pricing. I think what we haven't touched upon though is how bottles then come with the additional can of worms of how you communicate deposits. or voucher schemes and things like that, which are really challenging to try and communicate to customers how investing upfront in a reusable container then has longer term value. So that's really challenging too, and it's an additional challenge that the pre-fill model has, or in-store refills when it's liquids or it requires a bespoke container. That wasn't something that we necessarily focused on the trial, but I think that is one that we're wrestling with in the background, isn't it, Katie?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I mean, I think great summaries from you both, and I think, like I say, we are still within the learning journey, and we've got information to add. And I guess just to round off today's session, I guess, you know, what's next? You know, what are the next steps in, you know, to look at reuse and refill, and what are you planning to do? Susie, if you could start, please.
Yeah, no problem. So we've obviously, I've been learning an absolute ton since we launched our first store in Middleton back in 2020. And of course, working with WRAP and Unilever over the last 12 months has really helped us expand our knowledge and learning. But in particular, that's been focused on the customer experience, which Rachel's touched upon. Rachel also mentioned that we haven't talked much today about operational complexities behind the scenes. So just to kind of go over that point, when I say complexities, I really do mean complexities. Pretty much nothing for refill and reuse, as I've now painstakingly learned over the last few years, nothing for our business anyway follows the same processes as buying or selling standard products in a way that we've been doing for 70 years versus now 2. Most things on refill are manually cranked. We have to try and deal with challenges around unique supply chains. Our systems don't talk to each other very well when it's dealing with variable weights. We're asking the stores to do unfamiliar cleaning, ordering, replenishment tasks that they just wouldn't normally have to deal with. And then not to mention the issue further down the supply chain around our suppliers having to do things that they're not used to doing as well. So ideally, we're taking bespoke bulk pack formats from them at relatively tiny volumes when their entire factory has been designed around filling into small retail packs at extremely high volumes. So we have been working quite a lot in the background to do our best at integrating as much of this as possible into standing operating procedures, because there's only so much that my team can keep doing on a manual basis, particularly if we want to get to that all-important scale. But yes, what is next? Well, we're taking the fantastic learnings that we've got from this project, combining them with the operational improvements that we need to make in the background. And with a bit of luck, you'll be seeing us making some more changes to our 4 refill zones by the end of the year. I can't talk too much about it now. You will have to watch this space a little bit, or my PR team will probably jump on my head. But in a nutshell, not to give too much away, you know I'm a bit of an oversharer, Rachel, don't you? What we are doing is really focusing on customer communications. We're going over every single touch point in their refill shopping journey and trying to make it as easy as possible to use. We've got some snazzy new digital POS coming in, so hopefully videos of how to use it versus the static posters that we've got now will help bring that how to use experience to life a little bit more. We've got some really cool brands and products coming in. Can't tell you exactly what, but let's just say I've enjoyed doing quality testing in the hoppers a bit too more frequently than maybe I needed to. There's a little bit of a clue in there somewhere. I mentioned in the chat as well, there was a lot of talk about containers. Yeah, totally get it. The whole I've forgotten to bring my container thing is a challenge. Just for the record, Asda are not in the camp of giving away free single-use bags. We just don't think that's the right thing to do. It doesn't align to what we're trying to achieve. But we are looking at launching a brand new, very low priced reusable bag. But it's just trying to get that sweet spot of price that encourages people not to keep buying a new one each time, but then doesn't put them off if they have forgotten or buying one for the first time. So we are doing more on that. Longer term, we hope to try and incentivize as well, maybe through our rewards app. Don't know, we're still working on that.
Thank you, Susie. Any more?
I haven't finished.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were. So keep going.
The scales as well, they were a bit of a sticking point. So we've gone back to basics there on screen by screen, just daft stuff like people didn't realize that they had to touch the screen and that the red light of the Avery Burkle logo, they thought was a barcode scanner, just like really crazy small things like that. We're just going back to basics. We've got a terrible permanent label at the minute that ruins your containers when you stick to them. It's like the proverbial SH1T to a blanket. They'll be gone for good, thankfully. Some nice new peelable adhesive coming soon. A lot more to do on price and value communication. Watch this space. That's all I can see. All I can say. But yes, lots more coming soon. Watch this space. It's exciting times.
Excellent. Have you finished now?
I'll finish now. Yeah. That's
Yeah. So yeah, watch this space, I think, coming from Asda, and it's great to hear that the customer, you know, is being put at the heart of this, but equally really understanding the operational challenges behind it. And I think that's always the discussion that we've sat through many a meeting. You know, it's chicken and egg, isn't it? You've got to have customer demand, but to have customer demand, the system's got to work, and the system's got to work both for the customer and for your operations. So, you know, finding that sweet spot is obviously really important, and I guess you're moving towards that, and we'll
trying. There was a question in the chat around, is the bulk packaging truly cheaper than pre-pack? The answer is 100% not. Nothing is cheaper about doing refill for stores at the minute, but that's where we need to get to. Trying to make it scalable means trying to make it commercially viable, and that's not necessarily making money. It's at least breaking even as a goal, to be honest, to be perfectly transparent with you, and that's the journey that we need to go on.
Thanks, Susie. So yeah, Katie, for you as well, what are Unilever planning to do next?
Yeah, so I think, I mean, I've mentioned it through in point to bring it all together, though. I think, you know, we return on the go is going to where our focus is for now. I think we really want to take that as a focus because it is the more convenient. There's fewer barriers, fewer behaviour changes that you're asking for consumers to do. So and there's still a lot to learn about that space, as Susie mentioned. You know, pricing of a bottle versus a thing, and the DRS coming in, and you know, there's an awful lot that's going to evolve in that space over the next couple of years that we really need to get our teeth into. So I think we remain committed to focusing on that in the short to medium term. But, you know, we do want to continue to experiment. There are other models to make refill and reuse as well. There are different solutions. There are lots of different partners, different ways of shopping. So we want to continue to just learn in the whole space of refill and reuse to really drive that waste-free future. So nothing's really off the table for us. We just need to make sure we're making sense of it and making some, you know, letting us learn something so that we then can take on forward. So we're committed. Return on the go and pre-fill is our number one right now.
Okay, so I think we're heading close to time, and I would just like to say, in sort of final summing up, the report contains lots and lots more information about the journey we all went on together, and we've only presented obviously a fraction of that today. So, you know, please go and read the report, which will be available early next week, along with the recording of this webinar. And I guess, first of all, a really big thanks to everybody that took part in this project, both from the RAP side and Katie and Susie, and the people we worked with, like DGS and Behaviour Change. It was a real journey, and obviously particularly I feel like I'm doing an Oscar speech or something. We've got to thank our funders. You know, otherwise this wouldn't have happened. It gave the chance to really be quite experimental in this, and although we haven't solved every problem, and there's still lots more work to do, you know, in the whole shopper journey. And I think that was the thing for me when we started this project, is looking at that whole shopper journey. You know, we went for one particular part for the interventions, but there's still lots more to involve in this. And as people start to get used to using the refill zone, I'm sure at home and pre-shop are going to be important. You know, remembering the container, you know, taking it home to decant, or remember what I actually bought in that Tupperware and when I bought it. So I think there's still lots more to do, but I think, you know, the basics that we've got out of this project are fear and embarrassment, you know, a basic emotion that people are experiencing. The idea of price not really being be able to understand price in both in what to buy and the packed equivalent. And equally, you know, creating a bit of a buzz around this. It is something different and is something new. But when we stepped out of the sort of Asda brand sort of area, and we did put a seal on a marker, and
you got sacked for that, Rachel.
and we did use slightly different and handwritten A board, you know, that kind of bringing it out as something different at this stage in people's journey is really important. Now, you know, further down the line, we have to ingrain the habits, we have to get people coming back and all of those things. And I think, you know, we can still do that. So I'm hoping everybody takes away some learnings from this, and reading the report have some more. If anyone listening have more questions, then please contact us. I think oh, someone's just popped up, yeah, about sharing the chat. So yes, we'll take that offline. I think you can. I'm not the most technical people, but I'm sure, you know, as part of the output from this session, we can have a look at that. Whether we can answer every single question in response, I will need to check in with Susie and Katie on that, how we manage those questions. But certainly we'll do that. We'll try to get back to you in some way, shape or form. But I think the key thing is, yeah, thank you for joining us all today. And I hope you've enjoyed it, and look out for your email, and have a good rest of the day, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.